For-
It is 6 o'clock. I would like to call the regular school board meeting to order. Michelle, may we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Megan Miller,
Present.
Tom Hankins,
Here.
Brian Anderson,
Here.
Brian Nichols,
Here.
Amy Levy,
Here.
Greg Schneider,
Present.
and Tia Johnson.
Here.
All members are present.
Can I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Megan Miller, seconded by Amy Levy. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Tonight, we have the pleasure of having Principal Sam Carnes from Todd Elementary to introduce some students who are going to lead us in the pledge.
All right. Well, I appreciate the honor in bringing a couple of my students here tonight. So I invited Jamison and Sophia Hudson. They're both fifth graders. I'm going to brag for just a second. I shared with a few board members. But both of them were junior coaches this year with our Playworks. One jammed out on the guitar during our talent show. The other did a gymnastics performance. One plays the violin. The other one is in band. So really great students here tonight to represent Todd. I'm very proud of them. Super sad that they'll be leaving us next year to go back to Fruzen. But I told them that the door will always be open at Todd, home of the Timberwolves. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Jamison and Sophia to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Next, we have our recognitions. And tonight, we are going to recognize the girls' basketball team. To quote former NBA coach Phil Jackson, "The strength of each team is each individual member. The strength of each member is the team." This synergistic spirit was exemplified this past spring when the Beloit Memorial girls basketball team came together to advocate individually and collective for their voices to be heard. This full court press effort was an illustration of the qualities identified in the district's Portrait of a Graduate. Fearless learners, self-motivated, courageous, seeks collaboration, and creates inclusive and diverse opportunities for themselves and others. Ambitious innovators, trailblazers, and problem solvers, able to initiate and bring forward big ideas as they collaborate with others, and taking the ability to take risks. Global contributors, impactful, supportive, able to think beyond now. A spirit that encompasses advocacy and the ability to engage in open and respectful dialogue. Understands the importance of everyone's voice. Resilient leaders. Persistent, confident, maintains a strong sense of optimism in overcoming challenges, elevates peers by building trust and leading by example. Critical thinkers, independent, thoughtful, draws upon experience for self-reflection and creating connections to problem solve. effective communicators, purposeful, intentional, articulate, confident, competent in social skills and networking abilities. On and off the basketball court, the Beloit Purple Knights reflect these qualities. They generously applaud one another's success. Each has clarity of purpose. Thinking beyond their high school experience, each has an enduring determination to pursue excellence. Each has the goal of improving themselves and their community. They persistently examine ways to improve their lives and the lives of others. We commend you for your unified effort in advocating for yourselves and your teammates. As young leaders and student athletes, in the starting lineup and from the bench, it's a slam dunk that you hoopsters are all game changers. No, thank you. Thank you.
If you are a member of the girls' basketball team, can you please stand to be recognized? And again, thank you all for coming. Let's give them one more round of applause. Now, I know you all have another engagement, and so again, thank you all for coming out tonight. I appreciate it.
That brings us, thank you. That brings us to item 3, reports to the board, the superintendent board report.
Sure. So my report will be real quick tonight. First of all, I would like to thank all of the people who came out on last week, Friday, to our years of service and retirement banquet that we had. It was a wonderful experience for everyone who was able to attend. I would like to say that, you know, it's bittersweet because you have a lot of people that you know that have worked in our district tirelessly over the years, and it's a happy moment, but it's also a sad moment because you see some of the retirees, of course, retiring. The years of service recipients were 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 years of service. And we had a 40 as well. And so those collective years of working in the school district, like I mentioned, is very, very precious to the school district of Beloit. Their service goes without saying. And in a day where people don't stay that long anymore, there's still a very proud space that we have here in the school district of Beloit. Secondly, of course, we have graduation tonight. Well, not graduation tonight, sorry. Graduation Saturday. 10 o'clock right here at Jacobson Field. And so we'll be graduating plus 400 students, and it's going to be an amazing opportunity for everyone to be a part of. I would just ask the community to be mindful that we open our doors, I think, starting at 9 o'clock. And so 8:30? 9:30? 9 o'clock, yeah. We open our, correct. So we open the doors at 9 o'clock, and of course, there's ticket opportunities as well. One of the things that I like to say about this class is, again, that every class has something that's special about them, and this class is not exempt from that. To me, this class has shown, again, that resiliency that a lot of times people don't necessarily talk about. There's been a lot of different challenges this class has had to endure, but I believe going through our opportunities here in the school district has made them that much greater. And so this Saturday, 10 o'clock starts the graduation. Of course, doors open at 9. That is my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. Legislative update. Ms.
Thank you so much. I'll be very brief, and also just have to say I'm really sad to not be at graduation this year, but I'm going to be attending my daughter's dance recital. This will be the first one I haven't been at, and I'm really sad to miss it, but very proud of all of our Purple Knights. So I was hoping just to draw everybody's attention to, in our legislative kind of capacity as a school board, as we're all elected officials, it's usual that we would have some sort of a legislative hearing session. We used to have these workshops once or twice a year. That cadence was interrupted by COVID, which was then interrupted again by like superintendent searches and other priorities, right? But now that things have settled, the dust has settled a bit, I think it's really important for us to resume that practice. And so Board President Johnson and I spoke a little bit. I had reached out, so just a quick, so everybody can be on the same page. We're going to try to schedule something personally, but I want you to weigh in. I think it would be best to do it sometime like late September, early October, when we have like a sense of what our budget is looking like, and we'll have had robust discussions around that. I know later in our meeting today, we're going to be talking about facility concerns, whether or not to go to referendum. So all of those things, whatever shape they take, will be a little bit more firm by that point in the year. Typically what we do is we hold like a special meeting that's posted usually prior to our regular board meeting. So we might want to do something like around 5 or whatever that works out to be. We invite all of our state representatives. We can certainly invite local reps as well. And typically we've invited people like State Senator Mark Spreitzer and what would then be, Representative Anderson, or, and anybody else who's able to come to give a short, hey, this is, legislatively what I've tried to do for public education, and they have it sort of the floor. And then each of us have the opportunity to ask a question, and we try to sort of time limit it, right, so that we can kind of get everybody's concerns fielded, right? Some topics that we've elevated in the past have to do with sort of like the broken funding model of public schools, right? They've been consistently underfunded to inflation for the last 16 years or so, so that's something that we would consider raising and asking, like, what are we doing about that? Another piece would be like unfunded mandates. So WASB, which is of course a nonpartisan organization of school boards, has a position against the legislature imposing unfunded mandates on public schools. So that could be another topic that we would discuss perhaps. Executing on the Blue Ribbon Commission, which is again a bipartisan-led committee that made recommendations many years ago now, back in 2018, about improvements that should be made, particularly to funding for public schools that's really never been acted upon. So it's really important for us to use our voices as elected officials to raise concerns, to protect and advocate for just like the kids we just saw here today and all the kids in our community. So having said that, does anybody have any thoughts, questions, or considerations for how we should move forward in scheduling this, whether it's logistics or topics? Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I would schedule earlier than late September, early October,
Okay.
just because of where we are with the budget and if we have the ability to influence, which theoretically we should. So I would push for late summer.
That sounds great. So like something like late July? Is that palatable to everybody?
Well, of course, confer with Dr. Garrison because
Right.
educators coming back and all of that. We don't want to overwhelm our administrators, but I would think later in the summer would be better.
Great. Any other thoughts? Well, thank you so much for the floor, Board President Johnson. Oh, did you have something? Go ahead.
I just think it's a really good idea that you mentioned our local leaders, city, county also. Phil Gorman lives with Mark Spicer. And there's another couple in the Beloit School District that are county supervisors also. I think it's an excellent idea.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much. Well, and in the past, we have extended the invitation quite a bit. So like we've invited like local, state, I think we invited somebody from Mark Pocan's office at one point when we were in CD2, so we can invite somebody from Representative Steele's office, right? Like I don't know if I said the name right, but right. So totally, that would be amazing. Any other thoughts? Thank you so much for the opportunity, Board President Johnson.
Thank you, Board Member Megan Miller. I really appreciate that. That brings us to public comment. Do we have any public comments?
Yes.
Okay.
I have one present and I have one email.
Okay. The Board of Education meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying on the business of schools. The board, as a representative of the representative body of the School District of Beloit, wishes to provide an avenue for any individual to express interest in and concern for the schools. Accordingly, the public is invited to attend any sessions of the board or any meetings of board committees. Individuals recognized by a committee chair are able to speak regarding noticed agenda items during committee meetings. At every regular meeting of the board, time is set aside for the personal presentation of an individual or group comments on areas of interest or concern. Each person wishing to speak shall complete the public comment card with their name and last name and home address, including city and state. The speaker shall include on the comment card the topic that the speaker is wishing to address. The comment card shall then be given to the board secretary for entry into public record. Speakers will be announced and invited to the podium by the board secretary. Each person will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Should the individual require translation assistance, a translator may be of the individual's choosing or one provided by the district. Public comments requiring translation will be given 6 minutes. An individual's 3 minutes may be yielded to another individual. However, each person must complete a public comment card indicating if speaking or yielding time. Give the public comment card to the board secretary and approach the microphone to state the first name and that the 3 minutes are being yielded to another individual. An individual may speak on behalf of a group. However, no more than 2 people may yield their time to any one speaker. Provisions of the Open Meetings Law shall govern the procedures for the conduct of the board meetings. No person should interrupt the board meeting by speaking out from the floor. The board will not take action on public comment topics that are not on the agenda, but may, if appropriate, respond. The Board of Education endorses the following statement made by the chair. Norms for public comments during board meetings. Members of the public are welcome to attend all open meetings of the Board of Education. Individuals attending board meetings are expected to conduct themselves in a respectful and courteous manner that models appropriate behavior for our students. Individuals wishing to comment are expected to comply with the following norms in order to maintain a respectful and orderly meeting and to prevent discussion of confidential matters in public forum. Comments should be directed to members of the Board of Education and not district employees, students, or other members of the public in attendance at the meeting. Signage, banners, or other materials which impede any person's view of the proceedings shall be relocated. Speech that is belligerent, disorderly, disruptive, repetitive, or which exceeds the allowable time permitted for each speaker is prohibited. Concerns or questions that entail the disclosure of identifying information regarding specific students are prohibited. Response from the board, if any, will be limited to clarifying inaccurate information, seeking additional information from the speaker, or acknowledging that the speaker has been understood. The board will not debate with an individual, and the board may not take action on an item raised during public comment that is not on the meeting notice or agenda. The chair will interrupt and rule an individual who violates any of these norms out of order. If ruled out of order by the chair, the individual's opportunity to address the board will end immediately and the microphone will be turned off. Thank you for your participation and courtesy. Who do we have first?
Do you want to start in the room or with the email?
Go ahead and start in the room.
Okay, so I have Eunice Steen.
Good afternoon. My name is Eunice Glass. I live at 2035 South Mountain Avenue, Beloit, Wisconsin. And I'm speaking on discipline. First let me say this. I subbed in the school district. I don't know for how long. I don't remember what year I started. I don't remember what year I stopped. But I subbed at every school in the district. I subbed for every class in the district, from kindergarten to 12th grade. So I know what goes on in the school district. And I also know, I keep hearing about, oh, the kids are so bad, that they need discipline. I asked, when I kept hearing this and what you were doing with the restorative justice, what they had tried to do, what was in place, and then all of a sudden you're going to get rid of it. I talked to Mark, our senator. I always pronounce his name incorrectly, so you know who I'm talking about. So I said, Mark, in the early 2000s, when When they started saying that the parents could not discipline the children, and they were taking them down, calling them, they were going to court, having to go to court because of they spanked their child or something. I wrote to Judy Robeson and told her, I said, there's a difference between discipline and abuse. And if a parent cannot discipline their child, you're going to have problems down the road because those kids are going to feel like they can do anything they want to. That was in the early 2000s, and that's what's happening now. So I told Mark, I said, would you find out for me when that statute was changed? I did some research myself. The statute was not changed. I called Mark back. I said, I'm finding out that the statute was not changed. I said, but why was those people downtown in court having to pay a lawyer so that they didn't end up in prison? Okay? Mark did some research. I'm going to send it to all the board members. When I get I'm going to send it to each one of you because I can't read all. I only have 3 minutes. I can't read all this. But I'm going to read what Mark sent me, and he also he says, from my research, I agree there does not seem to have been a change in status related to the parent's right that caused an increase in charges. I understand that anecdotally, more charges began happening in the early 2000s, but the last change of the parent's ability to raise that affirmative defense was in 1995. It is possible that evolving social ideas about this type of discipline have had an impact on the reasonable person's test or on the prosecutor's willingness to bring charges. So what was considered to be reasonable a few decades ago by a judge or jury may be considered unreasonable now. But I will send you and that's what happened. That's why the children are doing whatever they want to, because no parent can go downtown to go to the court system, pay for that, and try to raise a family too. So what happened? They did not discipline the children because they were scared to. And now all of a sudden, you're gonna start expelling them. No, they need to be educated. You fix it. They started it, you guys fix it. Thank you.
Michelle, the next one, please.
Next, we have an email from Santia. I am writing to express my deep concern and disappointment regarding an incident that took place at your BMHS Barkin Arena on 6/1/24. My family and I traveled from Texas to Beloit to visit family and celebrate a homecoming and baptism of my child. Unfortunately, our visit was marred by an unpleasant encounter that has left us deeply troubled. Upon arriving at the Barkin Arena, which was being used by the YWCA for the Elite Ladies basketball event, we paid our entrance fees and went in. 30 minutes later, my husband and my daughter went outside to get my daughter's service dog, which was being dropped off by the groomer. She collected the dog and placed him in the pouch that she uses to carry him. The dog is trained to provide a service for my daughter, and she had with her the documentation showing this. Upon re-entering the event, they walked past Amy Levy and the others who were hosting the event and were told nothing. At the time of arriving back to their seats, Amy Levy came to the bleachers and said that they could not enter with her service animal. Despite our willingness to provide the necessary documentation, Amy Levy refused to see the paperwork, stating that it wasn't in the school district's contract with the YWCA to allow service animals. This caused a scene in front of spectators, so in an effort to avoid further disruption and further embarrassment, we left. Service animals are protected under the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act, which mandates that businesses must allow service animals to accompany their handlers. Additionally, School Board Policy 830 Rule 1 states that service animals are allowed on school premises when the premises are being used by other organizations. Ms. Levy's refusal to allow a service animal to enter the event was in violation of federal law and board policy. I urge you to review these relevant laws and policies regarding service animals to prevent such distressing incidents in the future. We trust that you will take the necessary steps to ensure that no other family has to endure the same distress we experienced and prevent exclusion based on disability. I pray this gets in the right hands and someone reaches out to me. I have included my contact information above. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That brings us to item 5A, April 24 monthly financials. Mr. Chady?
Good evening. Let me present and get the right screen up here, hopefully. Actually, let's do this one. All right, as is customary, we'll review the financial activity for the month of April 2024. Try to keep this a bit higher level this evening, being that it's before the full board. If there are specific questions that board members have, be more than happy to go back and capture those with you. The document is shared via board docs in both the PDF, and there is also a link therein for a Google shared file. Within that Google file, each of these links is also active so that people can access that documentation as well. Beginning by looking at the monthly summary report, you can see here revenues and expenses for each of our different funds within the school district operations. Revenues for the month just over $6,071,000 and change. Expenses for the month just over $7,447,000 and change. So outflows, expenses going out just shy of $1.4 million in revenues coming in. Pretty typical for the month of April, honestly. So you can see where we had outflows significantly greater than revenues. In Fund 10, almost $810,000 difference there. Special Education Fund, $888,000 and change. Food Service Fund, $388,000. However, in the Community Service Fund, you'll see that we had revenues coming in $640,000 greater than expenses going out, largely because of the receipt of the April tax credit, property tax credit, which was applied in Fund 80, and then the balance in Fund 10. And those details are commented in some of the narratives that follow as well. Perhaps more importantly, for the month, total revenues again, $6,071,000, expenses $7.4 million. So again, our expenses are exceeding our revenues for the month, about $1,376,000, pretty much the norm. That's not really a concern. Fiscal year-to-date expenses, nearly $82 million, 81.9. Again, outpacing revenues 70.9 by about $10,987,000, and again, pretty standard. Following that are a bunch of comments that talk about the linked financial reports. We'll kind of skip over those for now, but we'll perhaps come back to that in just a minute. I do want to scroll down towards the bottom of the financial activity report. Here we go, cash and investment report. So you can see as of the end of April, the financial status where our assets were on deposit, the vast majority of which were with First Mid Bank and Trust. You can see the interest rate there. The end of the current month reflects the status at the end of April. Total investments, total assets on deposit, $25.25 million. Comparison to the end of March for the same year where we had $30.5 million. And then where we were at the end of April in 2023, which was at $35.5 million. If you're looking at the difference between 25.2 and 35.5, keep in mind that we applied about $12 million in additional assets towards a debt payoff back on April 1st. So that then contributes to that decline in assets. And then again, New to the cash and investment report here within the past couple of months is this information on the bottom, which talks about where our current cash liquidity is. Cash liquidity is essentially composed of the general fund checking and the ICS shadow, which is our sweep account. And then, let's see which other account. No, it is those two accounts. So you can see that comparison again within the current fiscal year, this month to last month, and then as well to last month, or this month a year ago. Let me state that correctly. And then perhaps more importantly is the approximate number of days of liquidity. And again, if we simply put this in there, if receipts or revenues into the district were to stop for some reason, good example might be that if the school district of Beloit was practicing similar to a colleague to the northeast, the Milwaukee Public Schools, some issues that they're having, how much longer could we operate with the cash that we have on hand? And you can see that we can make it 54 days as of the end of April with current cash on hand. And again, you can see that that number will change from month to month. You probably heard me state that last month. So last month we had 71 days of operation. This month, 54 days of operation on hand. And again, that's attributed to just that change in cash liquidity from 22.5 million to 17 million. Any questions on that before I move on? Okay.
I was just waiting
Yeah.
to be recognized.
I'm sorry, I was reading the report.
Oh.
Go ahead, Ms.
Thank you
Weedy.
so much. Could you just speak briefly to first of all, 54 days is concerning. Thank you for sharing that information with us. I think it helps put some of our decisions into perspective. What impact our current fund balance has on that number?
So that really, a fund balance changes every day, and in fact, even during the day. So most typically, fund balance is referred to as a value that exists as of the fiscal year end, so 6/30 of 2023. But really, when you look at this, you can almost equate that $17 million to kind of what our fund balance per se is. So it's pretty close to that. You know, you talk about 54 days, you know, concerning. We'd certainly like that to be higher, right? Yeah, you know, I think we ended the year, if I recall correctly, at like 9-point-something% of fund balance, and our board policy speaks to 14%. Right, minimum, thank you. So if we were at that 14% mark, that's a 5% increase, right? So that's probably an additional 23 days or so. So kind of like 77 days is maybe our target of where we should be, just to kind of tie that back to your fund balance inquiry.
And then my last question on this section, what happens if you, for some reason, go past your estimated days of liquidity? How would that impact the district's day-to-day function?
As far as having more days of liquidity?
So if for some reason money coming in ceased,
Okay,
and this estimate says we have liquidity for about 54 days. If we get past that 54 days and assets are not restored to flowing into the
Sure.
district,
Yep.
what impact does that have on the day-to-day operations of our district?
yeah, thank you. So revenues and expenses fluctuate throughout the year, so that 54 number will go up and down. And I think your real question is, what happens if we start seeing that number decline, right? We start seeing, unfortunately, that fall to less, or we get to the point where we don't have enough cash on hand to pay our day-to-day operations. We do have a $7 million line of credit available currently through First Mid Bank and Trust. That line is available for us to access through June 30th of this year. It appears to me, I'll be looking at this again probably on Monday. It appears to me that we'll be okay. Districts typically hit a low point in their cash in mid-June. It appears to me we'll get over that hump okay and be fine. However, then districts will also, we need to look closely at our summer outflows, our revenues and expenses in July, August, September. If there's a need for us to access that line of credit in those 3 months, we have to access that in June and make that request. Because we can't request additional funds from the line of credit after June 30th. So we may have a carry cost where we have to pay interest for a period of time, somewhat unnecessarily.
And that amount that you paid, the $7 million line of credit that we have until June 30th, isn't that renewed annually? And is there an overlap on when we can access, or is there a gap?
It's more of a gap is probably the best way to state it. So it is an annual line of credit that's entered into. State statute says that we can't tap the line of credit after July 1st until a budget hearing has been approved by the board. And typically in Beloit, that has happened in September, October timeframe, hoping that we can push that forward a little bit. Late August seems a little bit premature to me, but maybe early September timeframe. We do receive a sizable state aid payment mid-September. So, kind of getting to that point is typically good. And then districts will hit another low point in mid-November. So we have some time between when we hold that budget hearing, get the line of credit in place before that mid-November potential need.
Thank you so much. That was helpful.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chady, could you just reiterate that again? I understand if you're going to tap the 7 million, it's got to be done by June 30th.
Correct.
And you said for how many days then that you can't tap it?
So between July 1st and when the district holds a new budget hearing, and then thereafter, the board can enter into a new line of credit agreement. So really from July 1st until probably late September, early October, we can't make an additional request from the current line of credit that we have at First Mid. So if there's a need in that period of time, we have to identify the need, and we have to make the request on June 29th, June 30th, receive those funds at that point in time, and then we're going to pay carrying costs, interest expenses for July, August, September, whatever, until we repay those funds.
Okay, and then just recent history, have you had to tap into that line of credit?
To my knowledge, the district has not had to utilize their line of credit for the past several years. Over the last 2 years, unfortunately, the district has operated at a deficit, which has required the use of fund balance to help backfill that deficit position. And that may pose challenges to us here.
And in your professional opinion, do you see anything on the horizon between now and mid-September or whatever that date was on the horizon without anything changing? I mean, status quo, that we may need to get into that? Or is that just a decision to be made at the end of June?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So, there's really two things that I need to be looking at over the coming week or two. One, the mid-June timeframe. I last looked at mid-June's potential need back in mid-May, so 2-3 weeks ago. It appeared that we would be clear there. If we can clear that, I suspect that we should be fine through July, August, September as well. But again, we need to forecast out our revenues coming in and our expenses going out to cover my butt.
And just one last, what is the interest rate on that line of credit?
Good question. If I recall correctly, it was about prime 5.5 maybe, something like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Apologize for not knowing that interest rate off the top of my head, but yeah. Any other questions on the cash and investments? All right. Scrolling down the monthly purchasing commitments, and again, board policy speaks to this, and it specifically says that the administration will make the Business Operations Finance Committee or the Teaching, Learning, Equity, Pupil Services Committee of any purchases made in the dollar amounts of $50,000 to $100,000. And I'll just pause there. I think there's a bit of misconception in the public that administrators have the authority to spend up to $100,000 at their free willy, which is not the case. They have the authority to spend up to $49,999.99. A penny more than that requires a second set of approvals by either myself or Dr. Garrison. So just continuing on, and whoops, didn't mean to do that. There we go. Continuing on, there was one purchasing commitment that was made during the month of April in the amount of $56,264 with IT Savvy, which is a technology vendor. Purchase order is indicated there. It was entered into on the 18th of April. And this is for the purchase of various technology devices that were damaged as a result of a water infiltration flooding incident that took place literally on the other side of this wall back on January 15th of 2024. Noted there in the funding source that that needs to initially be funded through the technology department budget, though we will be reimbursed by our property insurance less $25,000 deductible. So kind of a work in progress. We have to order the stuff, we have to pay for it up front, we have to submit the claims, and we get the money back from the insurance company as well. So just that's how that all transpires. Any questions on that?
Ms. Levy?
Thank you. Just one quick question. Is that $25,000 deductible, is that high for the industry, or is that in line or on the low side? I'm just...
Well, that's the deductible that the district had selected. I mean, honestly, we could probably get a deductible as low as $250 or maybe even $100, and we can get a deductible much higher. Your premiums, of course, get adjusted with that. With times of no or low claims, a higher deductible is beneficial, and unfortunately, then when you have claims at a $25,000 value, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chadian, that's a once a year deduction. I mean, the 25, then for a fiscal year?
Oh, another good question, Mr. Hankins. I'd have to look. So typically, insurance claims like that are per incident. However, sometimes insurance carriers will write their policy coverages in an aggregate. So if you had 3 or 4 claims, that would fall in there. Reflecting back on this, so we had this incident next door on January 15th of 2024. Then we had a related incident that occurred, was it about a month or so ago? Right. An outside water spigot, that service was turned off building-wide for the winter. We needed that on this spring, so it was turned on, and it started to rain again next door. We were able to connect the two and share with the insurance company that, hey, there ain't no way that would have broken if it wasn't for the original incident. So there was some additional claims that took place back in May-ish that are part of the same insurance claim. So we don't have 2 claims. They kind of lumped it all as one. Yep. I think with that, if it's okay with the board, I'll go back and do your will, but there are some notations in the monthly financial activity report here that speak about the revenues and the expenses and some of the activity that's highlighted on the financial statements. In the interest of time, I think I'll take a pause and step away from that. But again, if board members have a specific question, I'm not trying to hide anything. I just recognize that it's 6:44 and I started my presentation at 6:24, and business people, we count things, so that's 20 minutes. So,
Any questions?
Good
need a motion, don't we, Mr. Chady, to approve this month's financials?
You do, yes, yeah, they do.
Just
Yep.
want to make sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we get a motion for the approval of the April?
I make a motion to approve the April 24 financials as presented.
Thank you,
second.
Brian.
Second.
Moved by Brian Anderson, seconded by, whose voice? Oh, Megan? Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Any opposed? Motion passes. That brings us to district facilities, consideration related to the sale of real property continuation, and this is Mr. Chady and Mr. Brickle.
Actually, I'm going to start this conversation off with the partnership of Mr. Anderson. Go ahead, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, so this was in our previous Business Operations and Finance Committee meeting when we were still following that cadence. And so that committee had recommended that we utilize the services of a broker to evaluate the value of the building, and et cetera. And so just so everybody knows how we got to that spot. And obviously, we've got another discussion today, but I just want to set the stage there that's how we got to where we are today.
And with that, with this coming back to the board, there had been some, questions around what else could we possibly do with the properties or whatnot. And we thought that since it's now at the full board level, from the committee to the full board now, it's open for discussions once again. And I know that there's been conversations around this real property and the sale of real property and what we can do with the real property. But the first step was that the committee did ask us to go and see how much we could list it for from the brokers. From me and Mr. Chady's perspective, there is a RFP process that we look at for something like this, but we have people right here in town that could actually help us with that conversation, whether it be Caldwell Banker, 21st Century, and some other banks that could easily help us in this conversation as it pertains to how much we could get for the buildings. And so writing an RFP for sale of real property, in this case, I can say I don't have the experience in doing it. I'm not sure if Mr. Chady has the experience in doing it as well. But I'd rather me be honest with you all in that space. Just letting you know that we do have banks here in town that we could reach out to see, what would they, what could they provide for us in this service. So, Mr. Chady, am I missing anything in that thought?
No, I think, if we read the board policy, it probably, would state that we should use a request for proposal to solicit business from a commercial real estate broker. I've never written a request for proposal for commercial real estate stuff. I don't know who has. I might suggest that in lieu of that process, we simply contact Caldwell Banker Commercial out of Janesville, CBRE, who has a state representative. And if the board desires that we contact Century 21 here in town and or make a solicitation or request for a proposal or from Beloit Auction Service, we could do that too. It'll be interesting. I've never sold a building before. I somewhat know the people at Caldwell Banker Commercial out of Janesville. CBRE seems to have one individual that's assigned statewide. It appears to me she's located out of Milwaukee. Do any of these entities have experience in selling buildings? Beloit Auction Service has experience in auctioning off buildings. I believe Century 21 actually represented the district with McGlenigan School, if that's right. So just looking for direction there as to, the where and how. I've not made any formal approaches to any of those entities yet.
Brian?
Yeah, I guess I'll just start in by saying I think, in my day job, I run into some of these people you're talking about, and I will say that out of the entire group that you listed, I know Coldwell Banker out of Janesville does a great job, and I think they could handle that scope, whether, one building, both buildings, just from an evaluation standpoint. So I think, whether you inquire with more than one, I would certainly want them at least on that short list for sure.
Anyone else? Ms. Miller?
Yes, thanks. I had reached out to Board President Johnson, and she had recommended that I email Dr. Garrison, and I'm not sure if this was passed along to you or not, Mr. Chady, but one thing that I think is very important when we consider the RFP process is to think about the footprint that we want to have on the community. I know this has come up in discussion a few times, and I'm curious, and I don't expect you to know, but I want to introduce into the conversation. Quick Google search. There are a number of agencies that specialize in networking developers of affordable housing. And because both as a community member, I'm very concerned with the lack of access and availability at all of any affordable housing, it was also something prominently featured on the enrollment study about why our enrollment is declining. Housing is a huge part of that. And so I don't know all the legalities and that we, are or are not able to limit or kind of how we can structure an RFP. But I'm wondering if it's possible when we put out the RFP, if we could ask whichever real estate partner we contract with to focus on seeking out developers of affordable housing so that we could hopefully provide family-friendly, affordable housing opportunities to our community. Is that something that?
No, I would agree with that. I think both parcels of land are prime for some sort of residential redevelopment. The Wright building probably could be redeveloped within its current footprint. McNeil, my thought process on this, right? Maybe not a residential developer, but it's got a big building sitting in the middle of a lot of acreage. It would take about $500,000 to remove that building from that property. But then doing so, and I can't remember, Tommy, you remember how many acres, like 28 acres, 26 acres, is the McNeil property in its total. That can be prime for all sorts of residential housing opportunities, from single family to multifamily, apartments, condos, we have connected with the city of Beloit and the Greater Beloit Economic Development Corporation. GBEDC is certainly on board with, the need for residential properties as well. So I think, first off, you talk about an RFP. I'm hoping that we don't have to do that and we can just have the latitude to contact these brokers directly, because I think that's the best route here. And then two, we're really going to be relying upon these brokers to help market that property for these types of potential redevelopments. I don't want to rule anything out, perhaps though the exception that we would rule out the acquisition of either of those properties for a future educational institution, a school, which would be somewhat competitive to the district, which maybe would not be in our best interest. But it seems to me that, residential development, the McNeil, within the last week, a new potential opportunity with that site has emerged with our Clean School Bus Grant program. That will require some significant infrastructure with their current leased space, which may not have the capacity space-wise to meet their needs. So there might be a potential that the McNeil property could be leased to Durham, and then they could develop that to meet their needs too. Kind of big picture, haven't even had conversations with them about that, but I'm cognizant of the fact that their square footage of their current facility may provide limitations that would impose or what's the right word? infringe on our abilities to do what we're hoping to do with this clean school bus program.
I really appreciate that answer. That was really helpful and comprehensive, and thank you so much for receiving my comment. Just a quick follow-up, and then I'm good to yield. However it is that we move forward, and I realize that we're still like in the information gathering, direction gathering stage. Once the district has a sense of like what this potential scope is, could we work into the process? And I know this is a time thing, so I'm aware of that, but is it possible to have some kind of like community feedback session, not where, hey, what do you guys want? Because we don't want to mislead people if we already have stuff in mind. But once we see like sort of what's realistic, could we schedule a time or times to go into both of those communities and say, hey, we're working hard to like continue to move forward, you know, as a district and community. This is the scope of what the district has capacity for and what's been discussed, and could we get some feedback before this comes to the board next time or before final decisions are made?
So that's a great thought, Mrs. Miller. I think the part of, there's steps that we got to kind of work through, and some of this we kind of laid out, and a lot of different potentials that we have with these two opportunities. Once we know kind of what we can list it for and working with a broker and start going down that road, I think that is definitely appropriate that we, lean into some of the community conversation. However, it could be a lot of different opportunities there. A lot of people think, well, let's do this, let's do that. But at the end of the day, the board will have to make the final decision in what direction we go in. We'll be able to bring the information to the board as it stands, and then, of course, we have to work from there. Of course, we'll be working with our lawyers throughout as well, because there's certain language that we have to kind of work into every opportunity. And so I do think that's an appropriate space once we get to that point.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll just remind everybody that Board Policy 185.1 states that recommendations with regards to the retirement sale of facilities goes back through the Business Operations and Finance Committee. So I wrote down a number of questions that I think I need to be exploring with the potential brokers with regards to how the process works, the how much, the process itself, the fees, et cetera. Once we have that information and some sort of proposal back from a firm or firms, I'll be in contact with Committee Chair Anderson, and we can schedule a meeting then and then take it from there. So, thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question. One, thank you for clarifying that the city has been brought in. Has the county been involved in any of those conversations? And then my second question is, you had mentioned that you believe that not having an RFP would be the best way to go. Can you just give us an overview of why you would prefer to bypass the RFP process?
Sure. First question with regards to the county, we've made no formal efforts to reach out to the county, to my knowledge, with regards to the status of those properties. I think within the last 6 months, maybe a bit longer than that, we've seen the county retracting from operations within the city of Beloit. Not to say that they wouldn't have interest, but it kind of seems to me that they're going the other direction. With regards to the RFP, great question, and thank you for the opportunity to address that. I would have no idea what to put in that RFP as far as what our expectations would be. I think that's perhaps a better one-on-one conversation with the potential firms. And to be very honest with you, we're looking at a very limited number of contacts, I think, that we could reach out to. And my thought process there is that if there was a formal RFP that they had to respond to in a timely fashion, some of the potential interested parties, brokers, may choose not to participate, and then we lose that as an avenue as well. So my thought process is to reach out and have conversations with Coldwell Banker, CBRE, Century 21, and if the board's desires to reach out to Beloit Auction Service, I believe that they can sell as a realtor as well, if I recall correctly, and go from there.
I'm a little hesitant not to do an RFP for fear that the people you had in mind may not participate. So I'll just put that out there. And then two, I would like for us as a district to reach out to the county because I don't want us to close doors unnecessarily. So that's my,
Well, the county certainly has the opportunity, once the property's listed, to become a potential seller or purchaser, so.
or even a partnership with the county. I think without having the conversation, we don't know what could be possible.
Sure.
Brian?
So just one more thought, and then I'll be quiet as well. In an ideal world, we get the highest dollar value for the property, and it's for the best use that we want it to be used for. And that's what we would hire a broker to do, to say, hey, we'd really like you to focus on these areas, whether it's affordable housing, right? And they can focus on that and try to do that. I think what we need to be prepared for is if they say, hey, we've got 2 buyers. This one's going to develop low-income housing. It's going to be great for the city of Beloit, and we're going to give, and their best offer is, X. But I've got this other, potential buyer, and they're going to use it for whatever they want. Maybe they got no initial plans. It could sit there for another 10 years, but they're going to give us double, right? So we have to find out where our pain point is, and what's it worth to us to try to have this decision authority over property we will no longer be owning, and kind of just start wrapping your head around that, I think is healthy.
Tom?
Yeah, I just want to weigh in. McNeil property and the Wright property are 2 different animals. I think they should be handled separately. What can one be used for or the other? On the west side, Joe Stottleman with Angus Young, architecture out of Janesville, has done a lot of work with the city on land over there. And there is some rock formations over there that make it inhospitable to do some kind of thing, but that's not what our school board is here to do, is to be a developer of the land. I agree with Brian, but I just want to bring in the fact that you have real property, but you have a lot of inventory in that building that needs to be dealt with, and there's probably possible other buildings housing a lot of inventory. The Beloit Auction Service could be a great help in dispensing of that, while also I wouldn't dismiss Beloit Auction Service. They have a wide network, and they've helped dispense this before. I just want to make sure that they're given a fair shake. They're local. I always believe in staying local if we can. I understand Century 21, but I just want to put a pitch in for the real property, but also there's a lot of inventory to dispense with. Thank you.
Megan?
Thanks. I just wanted to respond. Board Member Anderson, you brought up a really important point, and just because we're having a discussion about direction, I would put forward that you can only make money off of a property one time. It's not like a reliable source of, sustainable funding. But what will be lasting is the product. It's not going to go away after a year, unlike whatever profit we're able to make. So I just think that with integrity for the entity that we are and the role that we play in the district and community, personally, I would be in favor of taking a lower amount if we're going to have an important asset contributed into our community, especially one that could potentially, benefit students and families. I'm definitely not saying anybody else is against. You brought it up, I'm weighing in. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I think it's important that we don't close off any avenues at this point. While I agree that affordable housing is something that the city is focusing on, as there is a very large shortage of affordable housing in the community. And hopefully we can move in that avenue. However, I agree that we may get an offer that we're going to have to take, partially because of the financial situation we're in. So even if we do a focus with the realtor saying we want you to look at in this area and see what we can find. We have to be open to everything. And once we get the offers, that's when we'll make the decision as to what we need to do. But we just keep everything open until that point in time. I am comfortable with reaching out and individually contacting the local, the organizations instead of doing a wide RFP. I think it's beneficial to work with those that are local, or at least the one within the state that focuses on buildings. But to stay local is good for the economy and good for the district and the community as a whole.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Let's see. Mr. Chady, don't go too far. The referendum, 2024 referendum consideration.
So, thank you, Mr. Chady. And this is going to be, of course, a conglomerate of all of us possibly participating in this conversation. One of the things that we've been working on and having conversations about, Board President Johnson, is, of course, the conversation around our referendums. Just to give a real quick preface of this conversation, we, of course, have had some opportunities that we have not, been successful in. And so the forward here that I have is just making sure everyone know that a decision tonight is not what I'm looking for, but I am looking for a discussion. I think it's very important that we, have this discussion now, because when we start laying out some of the opportunities that we have here in the school district, whether it be a November opportunity or April opportunity, both dates require us to have some action here at the board level. And it's always been my goal to prepare you all for the next steps in these conversations, especially as it pertains to referendums. Just a real quick snapshot. We have some results. We know these results. When I came here in April 23, we went to operational referendum for the first time in about ever. And we weren't successful at a 47% to 53%. This past April was 40 to 60. We just rounded up for 59, 41 was kind of what it was. And so we know that there's a wide discrepancy in both of these years. One could argue with the least amount of time we were able to get closer to a referendum passing from when I arrived, from on a longer amount of time in which we didn't. And just to give everyone just a quick snapshot of this thought here, and when we looked at all of the polls on the west side of town, 100% of the polls voted no from their overall just yes, no votes. And on the east side of town, it was a little over 83% voted yes. Voted no as well. So 84% on the east side of town voted no, 100% on the west side of town of the polls voted no, okay? I don't want to be confusing about that, but that's definitely a split in the previous year's conversation. But I'm not going to go too far into the history, but I do want to make sure we know that that's the space. As you can do the numbers yourself, a little over 1,000 people did not come out to vote in this past election, and that did put us at a disadvantage as it pertains to just voter turnout, okay? For whatever reasons, I can't always speak to why people don't come out to vote, but we had over 1,093, I think it was, when you add these two numbers up, of people who did not come out to vote in this previous election here on April 24. Over the course of this past year, we have had many conversations about what we would do with the money. Of course, we started way back in October of last year looking at some of this conversation, and we, landed at the opportunity around $9 million. Of course, that came from a survey. That survey gave us very slim chances of passing a referendum even at the $9 million mark. But just like my conversations with schools perceptions, you always bank on that middle group, sliding down into the more positive side of a yes thought. That just didn't happen for us in this previous referendum. And so here's how we said we would use the money. Of course, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.25, 2.25, 2.5, and $2 million. And of course, you've all seen this slide multiple times, so I'm not going to spend much on that. We do know that that referendum would have helped us to the tune of about $9 million, leaving us about a $1.8 million to still recoup, and we were definitely prepared for that, as this next slide indicates. So we were, of course, moving through our budget and having budget conversations along the way and looking at reductions. And so if a referendum would have passed, we would have been necessarily on the positive side with the reductions that we have already came up with. Naturally, we needed to have about $1.8 million with the referendum passing. Since it didn't pass, now we are trying to recoup the whole entire 10.8. If the referendum did pass, we would have been receiving $9 million, and we'll been on the plus side of probably $5 million, which could have been replenishing our fund balance, which that was my goal, our goal, I should say, as a district, to replenish our fund balance with things that we already, can do here on our side of the conversation. We still have money to go. We still have decisions that we're making. Right now, as it speaks, we are still, like I said, we went down the ladder to capture this 6.2, and now we're going back up the ladder again to capture the rest of the money that we would like to bring to the board, a balanced budget. The next few slides will capture a few things. One, we did reach out to Baird, of course, our partner in some of these conversations, and they were able to share a few slides, and that's why you see the Baird logo here at the top. Districts who have asked an operational referendum question since 1990. Clearly, you can see that the districts across the state of Wisconsin are in this place where funding inside of the districts, working through your day-to-day needs, has become an issue. Funding is very complex. We all know that there's billions of dollars that the state could release, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. However, that's not the case, and in the state of Wisconsin, over 86% of districts have already went to an operational referendum, not capital, operational, okay? The next slide shows you districts who have passed an operational referendum since 1990. Of course, you see 77% of districts that have passed their referendums, with 120 or 29% not passing. And so if you go back between this slide and this slide, of course, you can see that no matter what, you have a snapshot of districts really coming to the public and asking for support in the day-to-day operations. So what we're experiencing here in the School District of Beloit is not new to the state of Wisconsin. And I've stated before, our request is simply based off of, again, our needs, and is not, of course, in my humble opinion, a mismanagement of school funds. This slide, I will turn it over to, actually, I'm gonna talk to it. The referendum success statistics is also a snapshot that we've asked Baird to come up with for us. And we highlighted some rows here, but of course, this is information that you all can kind of, delve into. It's very important to note that as you go down the numbers here, you can see kind of what's happening when it comes to the passing of referendums, whether it be in-debt, non-recurring, or recurring referendum. The middle section is what we highlighted. It is our non-recurring operational conversation. And we wanted to add the percentages there as well, because one of the things that we'll have to consider, of course, is will we go to a referendum again in November, or will we go to a referendum again in April? And what I wanted to do was show you all this slide and make sure that there's complete understanding of what you see here. Naturally, you do see that during the presidential, non-presidential year, 75.8% passed their non-recurring referendums. And if you can go side by side, you can still see the differences of each. In the presidential year, 70% passed their referendums in November. And if you go back up to the top in April, that's the most recent conversation for us. You see the percentages there for passing referendums since 2000. The next slide kind of just captures some key takeaways from school perceptions. Of course, naturally, they helped us with our survey, and this was something that they also have had many presentations on Some of their presentations are done at the state conventions as well, and this was a slide that they graciously shared with us to share with you all. I think is a real good slide as well, but the slide pretty much gives you the percentages again and just a closer snapshot of the state of Wisconsin. And again, this is 1993 to 2023. This slide is really focused on our future election dates and timelines. I know I shared this slide not necessarily in this format in a previous presentation, but letting everyone know that the timelines are the timelines from which we have to go to put this out to the public, of course. If I was just to give you all a real quick snapshot, if we decide to go to referendum in November, we have to have our stuff ready in August. You see the dates, you can kind of break down the charts at your leisure. If we decide to go to referendum in April, we need to have our question ready by January, similar to what we've done here in the past. Naturally, we see the primaries, and of course, we see the spring general, the fall primary, the fall general resolution dates. I'm not going to go over all of those dates with you all, but I do want you all to know that I am working from timelines. And so as I've been working here in the school district, my team and I know that we have to stick to a timeline. We have to keep moving things forward no matter where the board is based off of this conversation. So of course, if we decide to go in November, we have a shorter timeline to work from to get this all prepared. If we go in April, of course, we have a little longer timeline to get everything prepared. That kind of brings me into this slide. And so in this slide, you see some of the advantages and limitations. I started with November because that's the closest date that we have as it pertains to if we want to go. The advantages, I'm gonna take a little time just kind of going through some of these: higher voter turnout, broader community engagement, aligns with the budget cycle, heightened public attention, statistically higher pass rate, as you all have seen, extra opportunity to ask. Funds could be used to support the 2024-2025 budget. The 2024-2025 budget cuts will show the work of the district in reducing costs with limited funding. Limitations, of course, you see there as well. Voter fatigue, that'll be three referendums in a row. Competing priorities, there's a lot of things that we're working on right now. This will be another one that'll, of course, rise to the top. Short period of time to develop a solution. Naturally, I think this is very important because, you know, we want public participation, we want community input, but we also have to get ready for a campaign, and so those are limitations with coming here in November. Of course, that shortened campaign period is there, and then of course, timing of referendum communication will occur before the new state biennial budget is approved. A large available for the first year budgetary impact is unknown. The next slide here is a snapshot of April. Advantages and limitations. Of course, we have a longer period to be ready for it as an advantage. We can focus on local issues. We can reduce voter fatigue. We have additional time to address district challenges, more time between referendums, of course, budgetary planning, and that last bullet to me is an advantage in both spaces because no matter what, the public will be able to see what we've been able to do with limited funding. The limitations are low voter turnout because, you know, in April, for whatever reasons, there's just lower turnout. Less political relevance. And so for whatever reasons, people that come out on presidential, they come out in, you know, a little bit more. And just by people coming out to the polls, that's a limitation for the April election timeframe. All failed operational referendums have been in April in the school district of Beloit. April has the lowest success rate for all referendums, both capital and operational. And so April is not necessarily a tough time because, again, we almost passed one before. It's just that we have to note some of the limitations in both November and, of course, in April. This last slide here, of course, we have the school district working very hard to, you know, of course, inform the board. We have an opportunity tomorrow. I just wanted to put this slide in. Of course, if you're available, we'll be doing a lunch and learn. It's a two-part series here, June 5th and, of course, June 12th. These sessions start at 12 noon. And that, I think they're going to go about an hour and a half, just give or take. And so I just want to make sure that the public is aware, and of course, naturally, the board is aware of this already. That is a very high-level overview of kind of where we are right now. I know we've had conversations before. I didn't want to, prolong the thought before we jump right into the discussion. So, Board President Johnson, that is the presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Chady, were you going to add anything to that presentation?
Available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Tom?
Yes, just looking at Baird's projections, and let's just go to the referendum success statistics by Baird. It says in the non-recurring April referendum success at 66.1%. Beloit is Beloit is Beloit. It failed by, 60% to 40%. So statistics, to me, you can read them any way you want. I don't think that pouring more people into the November referendum is going to make too much of a difference. I think, as Dr. Garrison and administration has talked about, in April 2025 has a lot of potential, in my humble opinion. I don't, just as one board member, I just don't think a November referendum is going to change anything that happened in April. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Levy, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you so much. So 2 things. I absolutely respectfully disagree with Board Member Hankins. I think that voter turnout inherently impacts decisions that are made. And I am confident that the more voters we can get engaged in the city of Beloit, I think the better our chances are to support our schools and our community and our district overall. That being said, I am certain that if we go to referendum, we will have a survey similar to how we have in the past with school perceptions. And my ask is that we have the information to understand what is our dollar amount to fully fund the district. And that number, whatever it is the floor and not the ceiling in the survey or the midpoint. I think that's going to give us an accurate projection of, is our community willing to support the full funding of our district? Because just from my perspective, it makes no sense if we need $10 to ask for 5 or 6, because we're still going to have to do massive cuts. And I think that's damaging to the relationship with the community. If we pass a referendum and then the cuts are still present, to a large extent, then community members are going to be like, what did I come out and vote for if we're still losing things that are really significant for our district? So again, my ask is that if the survey goes out, we understand what the number is to fully fund our district, and that is our floor, not the midpoint or the ceiling in the survey questions.
Brian Nichols?
Thank you. Thank you. I know we had this information in one of the presentations months ago, but we passed a rather large referendum. The last one that passed was in 2012, is that correct? What time of the year did it pass?
2012 was in April.
Okay.
But it was capital. It was capital.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was capital.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think from where I said, I think November's a little too early. I think the referendum fatigue, as you listed on the thing, I think is actually real, and I think we got a lot of work to do and get prepared for April. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Board Member Megan Miller?
Thank you so much, Board President Johnson. I do have an opinion on, I'm just going to divide this in my mind as between a what and a how. So I do have an opinion on the what, but I want to lead off with the how. I think no matter how, I suppose, or when we decide to move forward, I would really like to see the board go out and knock doors. And I want to describe to you, I want to paint a picture for everybody. All of us sitting up here, we're backed by a diverse group of people, right? And I think it's a really healthy board when there's a mix of folks, right, who sit together and work together, because then everybody has like a chance to feel heard and feel represented. So I think that we currently have that strength. And I think an amazing way for us to lean into that strength would be for us to like pair up. Like I would love to go knock doors with my neighbor here, Tom, and take some routes, introduce ourselves, and build some connection. Number one, because it shows solidarity when we can be shoulder to shoulder, and it's not like, oh well, I think Megan sucks, so like she came to my door, so I'm not gonna vote for her. No, it's like this is like a representation, right? Which is, I think, a huge asset that we shouldn't take for granted. Another perspective that I see a lot in the classroom as a teacher is like we are so still affected by COVID. People feel disconnected. Nationally, there are trends of a lack of student engagement. There's a lack of parent engagement. People are still coming out of our routines and like our COVID practices, and we are so disconnected from each other truly as a community in ways that we weren't before COVID. And I think this is a fabulous opportunity for us to kind of fill some of that space where like instead of people like kind of staying at home and getting what information we get from the computer or whatever, instead if we can go to people, like literally come to people's homes together and say like, hey, we're the elected community leaders right now for the School District of Beloit. We're here to ask for your support for the students in our district and what they need, and we're doing it together, right? I think that would be really powerful, and I am leaning toward November. If we end on April, I still think we need to treat this as though we're going for it in November. Like I would love to spend a few weeks out of my summer with any of you people sitting up here knocking doors with folks and really making connections in the community so we can start to like braid our engagement together. So that's what I feel most strongly about. So again, I am leaning toward November for pretty much the reasons that Board Member Levy expressed, but I'm really, really passionate about our how, and I'm hopeful that we'll all consider that and agree to do that.
Board Member Brian Anderson.
So great idea, Board Member Miller. I think that kind of personal touch is, you can't go wrong with it. And I think I agree with you that we do have that ability with this group of people to do that. What I would say for timing wise, I think if we do an exercise like that, right, and we put ourselves out, and that's part of our process to inform the public, I think we can have a bigger impact. Pick the number of people you think we can impact to come out and vote, whatever that number is. It's going to be a higher percentage of the population that would normally come out and vote. So from an impact standpoint, we could impact the results of an April election more so than November because it's just a bigger number. And we can still only knock on so many doors and touch so many people, right? So from that standpoint, I think I'd lean towards April, but again, I do agree that the how is just as important.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Certainly.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson. I just wanted to make sure that I heard you correctly. You think we would have a bigger impact when we have less people voting?
Yeah, so let's just say through our efforts, we touch 1,000 people and we get to have this one-on-one discussion, or we have listening sessions, and we are able to encourage 1,000 more people to vote that wouldn't have voted had they not gone through this process. If it's 1,000 people out of the 17,000 that are going to vote in November anyway, it's a smaller swing in the outcome of that election versus if we brought another 1,000 people to the polls in April when only 3,000 were coming out. Our efforts would have a much bigger impact on the outcome potentially.
That's an interesting perspective. Thank you for clarifying.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions? Or Tom?
Just one more comment. If and when we do present another referendum, I think it's very important we bring in the no voters and educate and talk with them. We can have all the listening sessions we want. There's a group who support a referendum, obviously. The no voters also reached out. So if we could bring them into the conversation and ask them why they voted no and how can we turn your no vote into a yes vote? And what is it that you're looking for from our district so you will make that no a yes?
Greg Schneider?
A question for Mr. Chady. Is knowing that November and April again, we're looking at 2 different calendar years for the referendum. Does that make an impact on when the district starts to receive the funds if the referendum's passed?
Yes and no, depending upon how the referendum is structured. So if the board were to decide to offer a question in November of '24, my question would be, is it from the framework of the 24-25 school year, or are we making a request for the 25-26 school year in November? If we were to go in November, you could conceivably, if it's for the 24-25, this upcoming school year, you could conceivably add that to the tax levy right away here in November of this year. If we go in April, then it's for the 25-26 school year. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Brian Anderson?
Sorry, that was just, my hand was not taken down. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay, thank you. And any other questions or comments?
I just had one more thought. Sorry, Mrs. Johnson. We have 2 questions that we can ask in a year, and I failed to mention this in this conversation, so I want to say it now. So you have 2 questions that you can ask in 1 year on any given referendums opportunities, either 2 capitals or 2 operational, or 1 capital and 1 operational. And so if we bypass November, we would be leaving a question that we could ask to our voters. If we chose to go that direction, we'd be leaving that on the table. And so I just want to make sure I note that in the conversation today as well.
I have a question, and under both, so the November, an advantage is that it aligns with the budget cycle, and then in April, an advantage is budgetary planning. So I'm wondering if you could clarify those advantages. And a question for Mr. Anderson, Chairman Anderson of the Finance, Operation, and Budget. Where are we at in budget planning? A concern of mine with getting the no voters to be more persuaded is how we resolve the cuts that we need to make.
Yeah, so I would say, budget-wise, November provides us with 2 fiscal years that we could consider. November provides a challenge in that our 24-25 budget, the board has to adopt a question by August 27th. We'll likely have a preliminary budget for the board to approve in mid-August, maybe early August. So it doesn't align well for really doing great forecasting as far as how much we're going to need. We also have to, efforts are to reduce our current spending by 10.8 million. we've got $6+ million of that addressed, but we're still $4+ million shy. And that's hard work, you know. The 6 million part was easy. The remaining 4 million is going to be extremely difficult. So we'll see how that all transpires. Deferring till April provides us with greater certainty in our request amounts. It also provides us a stronger ability to communicate with the public about those potential amounts. Board Member Levy talked about the school perception survey. If that's something that we desire to do again or not, that's a decision that needs to be made. You know, we've utilized them. The results weren't delivered upon, so I'm not sure if it was a wise investment. But if the board has a desire to go in November, it's unlikely that you have time to do a school perception survey between now and then. I mean, that's a rather compressed time frame. I think that would be a tight squeeze. So, you know, again, using that tool, if that's the board's desire, you could do that towards an April referendum, though to be honest with you, I kind of like the conversation that Board Member Miller brought up about using the network of the body, you know, and having those conversations with the community. I think the one thing that's being missed and not spoken about yet is much like what Mr. Hankins commented on, is the reasons why the referendums failed to begin with. I'm not sure that there's been any good debrief of the April referendum to identify those whys yet.
Mr. Anderson?
I mean, I think he covered most of it, but the other thing I'd add is, you know, it points out that we wouldn't have a final 24-25 budget until late September, right? Sometime in that time frame. If you go in November, we simply provide kind of a two-way budget, right? Because we could use some of those impacted funds if we know where it's coming in the second half of the year. Whereas if you go in April, you can put forth one budget with a little more certainty from a forecasting standpoint. So maybe that's an advantage. Maybe it's reality. I don't know if one's better than the other.
Thank you. Any other, Board Member Megan Miller?
Thank you so much. So just a question and a comment. The comment being, I'm going to the other side of the coin of what you just brought up, Board Member Anderson. I agree. I think that's a really important consideration. One thing that's possible, and I don't know, because to your point, Mr. Chady, we really haven't debriefed April. But I know that there has been feedback repeatedly from folks saying, well, what really is the opportunity cost? Now, if we have to present a two-way budget, we're going to get those hard numbers that people felt were lacking before, even though I actually want to commend the administration. I think we did a fabulous job showing that impact, aligning it to the strategic plan. But, you know, people are very hungry for more and more information. Well, this would actually put us in a situation where we would literally have, here is budget A, right, and here is potentially budget B. I think that actually might bring more people into the conversation and say, oh, wow, here are the hard numbers, right? And I don't want to overpromise. I'm not exactly sure what that budget, potential budget dichotomy might look like, but I think that gives us a better, more realistic ability to give those hard numbers. So that's just a thought. My question was, Board President Johnson, would it be possible, I don't know if we would need a motion to do this, but personally, I'm really interested in pursuing a school perception survey. I'm wondering if we could mobilize one that would test the waters, for what Board Member Levy recommended, here's our floor for fully funding the district. And then maybe based on those results, if it's 10% of people would support it or something, then we definitely don't go in November, right? And then there's more work to do. But if we could do a school perception survey, say, hey, this is the absolute minimum amount we would need, and there's actually some interest in supporting it, then that would help me, at least as a board member, make a better informed decision.
I do have yes, thank you, Mr. Johnson, Board President. I think, we have to, I'm just going to put it on the table. The goal of any referendum, of course, we want to pass them. we don't want to go into these conversations thinking we're going to, fail them, whether we're going April or November. The other side of this is all of my superintendent colleagues, I can just tell you all right now, they're aiming for November because of what the research says. Okay, that's on the table. You just had a higher chance of passing the referendums in November for various reasons that I can't, I'm not a genius from that perspective. But again, that's just when, for whatever reason, there's just a higher percentage, and that's just what the research states. Whether we go in April or whether we go in November, again, the goal is for us to be ready. I'm going to take back a statement that Mr. Chady said. It wasn't easy to get to that $6.25 million. It was actually hard to get that $6.25 million. It's a lot of work that goes into that. And his second statement is it's going to be much harder to get to that $4.5 million, which is absolutely true. There's a lot of work that goes into all of the things that, people are, trying to work towards. And so it's just a lot that goes into these referendum conversations. So I just want to make sure I put that on the table as well. I do agree with Mr. Chady's statement that we haven't done a real good debrief in the space. I think I've had a lot of individual conversations with people, but when you're trying to figure out the percentage of why people said no, it's actually pretty hard, just figure out why a large swoosh of people said no. I don't have all the people's phone numbers. We don't, have all those possible connections. But I can tell you we have competing factors here in the school district, and I'm not going to shy away from this thought, but we do have competing factors in our district where there's voices that support us and there's voices that, that doesn't. But I think you'll find that in every community during referendum times. However, our voices is just a little bit more louder here in our city. And so we're working towards, repairing and working towards hearing everyone's voices. But this is a space where, as a district administrator, I have to make sure that everyone is hearing both sides of the conversation, which is there's going to be a need because we have a deficit, and year over year CPI is not keeping up with the cost of inflation. And some of this is simply we can't pay people because inflation has went up and CPI has not kept up with it. And so there's a give or take that is eventually going to have to happen here in our school district where people are going to realize that we need these funds just because we need these funds. There hasn't been any increases from the city to us. So it only comes from the state. And so I just want to make sure I kind of note that thought as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chady, I've got one last question, and that is, if when we do a debrief, what does that look like? How much time do you need to prepare for, before we have that meeting, that discussion?
Well, that's perhaps a better question for Dr. Garrison than myself.
Yeah, I think if we was to do a public debriefing, we can post it, we can ask people to come out, but I'll be honest with you, it's a hit or miss in our city. We've asked for a lot of public participation before, and we get a handful of people come out, but it's not going to capture the 60-40, the 20% of people. It's not. I think the debriefing that Mr. Chady may be referring to, and the debriefing that I'm referring to, is all of us hearing from people and really taking in that information and figuring out what is that we can do differently to better prepare ourselves for the next referendum. I'm hearing both sides of the conversation. It was not enough time, or we weren't for sure what we was voting on, to it snowed outside and nobody could go out. And so it was a snowstorm that day, but it's a lot of different themes that we have to consider. I just would hope that no matter what, in this next opportunity that we have, that everybody as a collective will be pulling towards us passing the referendum, because there is not a shortage of opportunities on our side here in the school district. I believe we put out a lot of information. We had a lot of meetings, and you already had that presentation, but I think we all have to be involved in, making sure that this gets passed in this next conversation.
Board Member Megan Miller?
Thanks. I just had a question. I love the idea of getting feedback, and I agree with Dr. Garrison. We haven't always gotten a great number in terms of representation. Could we both maybe look into holding some kind of a session where we could get feedback? And could we potentially ask a question like that on the school perception survey, which again, I strongly believe that we should move forward with as quickly as possible, because that way we have that opportunity. It's a different energy, right? Like it's better if you can get some people together who can speak. It's a different experience, but also for folks who are unable to attend something, it allows people to kind of elevate voice, right? And say, look, I didn't vote for this reason. This is my, I think Mr. Hankins said it beautifully before. Like, here's what would turn my no into a yes. And we could create that space also in that survey. Like, why not take a multi-pronged approach?
Board Member Tom Hankins?
Yeah, I just want to add in that, as we all know, the no voters were well organized and well financed. I don't think it's real hard to reach out to those people to get them into a conversation, whether it be private, public, however you want to set it. But it's not just like throwing it into the wind and saying, okay, we're having a meeting, anybody want to come? And like going back to what Megan said, if we bring them into the conversation and listen and act and let them know that we are listening, it would do us nothing but good things. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members wanting to weigh in or have questions at this time? Okay, it appears there's a question or a comment from the floor. Yeah, I'm sorry, we're having a hard time hearing you up here. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Feel free. Yep.
I could tell you why there was a lot of no votes, but I won't go there. But I do think that it would be much better to have it in November. Doesn't mean the board is going to have to work hard to get all that information out there, but there's a presidential vote in November. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. There's going to be a lot of people voting. It makes sense for you to put that referendum out there and do the work to get it out there. Do the budget, do whatever you have to do. But to me, that makes plenty of sense. And I won't even go there to tell you why there was no votes, but I'll tell somebody later if they want to hear it.
Thank you. We would appreciate that. Last questions, comments, anything? No motions?
I mean, would we need a motion to ask to do a survey? Or Dr. Garrison, where are you at with, you and your team in terms of going forward with the school perceptions? Like, what do you need from the board?
Sure, I think that once we realize when we want to go, the survey feels better at that space. We're working through our numbers right now, so it's kind of hard to project what exactly we will need. But if we decide to go in our next conversation in November, that to me prepares my brain for a survey that has to go out. If we decide to go in April, then I got more time to put that survey together. I will say schools perceptions, they did a job for us. We typically get better results from just doing a Google survey to everybody. And so it's just a space that I have to kind of work through as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Board Member Levy?
Thank you. So two things. One, I just wanted clarification. Board Member Miller, are you asking for a survey to determine when we should go to referendum, or once we decide to go, a survey to explore other options? Because I think those are two separate things. And then the other thing is I would be interested, before we make a decision, to know what that estimated price tag is.
Thanks for the clarification. I think that the latter, however, let's say the board consensus is open to exploring November and the results come back like there's not a snowball's chance of it, then we have to just take that feedback and change direction. That's why I'm leaning toward going in November, because if we decided that we were open to going in November, we could proceed with the survey. We could get some great information from those who participate, and that can really inform how we continue to move either way. Like if we say, yeah, we'd like to go in November, but it's before that August date where we have to actually file, we could always change course, right? So for the most part, to clearly answer your question, I think that we should decide first when we're going, go forward with some sort of survey, which I'm in favor of a cost-effective option. If we think we can do it better with Google surveys, that's amazing. And then take that feedback and proceed accordingly.
And then just to follow up, thank you, because you made me think of something. Is there a point of no return? I know we have to have our question ready for August 27th. Let's say we develop a question. Can we decide, you know what, we thought we were ready to go in November. We're going to wait and go in April. Once your question is developed and submitted, does it have to go on the ballot? How does that functionally work?
Yeah, once, so we have, the question needs to be presented or sent to the clerk by August 27th. Once it's there, it gets printed on the ballot. There's no way to retract it, we'll put it that way. I mean, the ballot may not be produced for another 6 weeks thereafter, but once it's remitted, it gets printed.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay, I don't, oh, Tom?
Sorry. So we put out one for this last referendum, the survey, right? Is that correct? And what did that survey tell you as far as passability that you are now looking for again? I mean, when it got soundly defeated, obviously the survey didn't tell you that.
The survey did say that the survey said 3 different options, and the options.
Were the money options, yes.
Correct. But it also, no, it didn't tell us whether I was going to pass or fail in April. It just said that the chances of us getting the resources that we were asking for was $9 million, and it was barely the $9 million.
Barely, it would barely, okay.
Yeah, barely
So it was
that.
realistic then. Okay,
Yeah, it was very
thank you.
close, yeah.
Okay, that looks like we're all done with talking about the referendum consideration. Brings us to 6, the consent agenda. Does anyone need anything removed from the consent agenda? Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Greg Schneider, seconded by Megan Miller. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Oh, bless you. That brings us to Human Resources Employee Recommendations. A motion may be made and a vote taken to convene the Board of Education into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C of the Wisconsin State Statutes relative to considering employment exhibits. Does anyone have a need to go into closed session? I do. So,
Board President, yeah, isn't item C a closed session item? Then yes, so moved.
okay, thank you. Moved by Megan Miller, seconded by, anyone second?
Could I have clarification before we receive a second? Is this closed session for item C, or is this closed session for item B?
The agenda states that there's a closed session for item B. I'm not quite certain why it's printed like that.
Well, we always have the option to go into closed session for employee recommendations, but right under that, C is employee compensation, and I'm assuming it identifies employees, and that's why that is going to be closed session.
Correct.
But is your desire to go into closed session for item B or for item C?
C.
And because I'm asking because there are minutes attached to B. And no, that's fine, but we can't go into closed session just to approve the minutes. So just be mindful that those would have to hold over if we're not going to closed session for item B.
Oh, okay, I guess I'm confused. Minutes attached to B or to D?
To B as in boy, they're HR closed session minutes.
Okay. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to go into closed session by Megan Miller. Is there a
Second.
second by Greg Schneider? All in favor, or any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Oh,
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Roll call. Thank you. Getting late.
One quick thing, I was helping a person, so I'm sorry, who moved and seconded to go into closed?
Moved by Megan Miller, seconded by Greg Schneider.
Thank you very much. Okay, roll call, Greg Schneider,
Aye.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Brian Nichols,
Aye.
Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Tom Hankins,
Aye.
Megan Miller,
aye.
and Tia Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
The board may reconvene to public after this closed session in order to take any action, if necessary, on discussed items in closed session. Thank you.